Brien Foerster, welcome back to the program.
Always a pleasure, Russell. Thank you so much.
Well, since the last time we spoke, the elongated skulls in Paracas had DNA tests conducted on them in partnership with the Peruvian government. Before we get to the findings, what was the process in going about getting them done in the first place?
Well, that process took 4 years because involvement with the Peruvian government means lots of bureaucracy. So I first initiated consulting with the Ica Regional Museum, which has a very large collection of elongated skulls, located about an hour from here. So they recommended that I had to find a Peruvian archaeologist to head the study. And fortunately, we were able to get that. But then the whole process of getting permission to use the skulls in the museum, which they insisted on, these couldn't simply be skulls from a private collection or anything. They had to be ones that were well documented by them. So by the time we finally got the go-ahead, and then were able to bring a team down from the U.S. to do the actual sampling, and then take the results or the samples back to the U.S. and distribute them to 2 different genetics labs and get the results, it took 4 years.
So these aren't the results from the skulls in your museum, or they are?
Actually, yes. We did, I think we did 8 from the Paracas Museum, and then the other 10 were from the Ica Regional Museum.
Now, in the reports, does it break down the findings for each individual skull, or is it an overall report?
No, it's one for each skull, and in some cases 2 samples were tested for each one.
Were any of the skulls found to be fake or unable to have testings done on them?
With 2 of the samples, actually, I guess in total 20 were done, because I'm only including where we actually got DNA results. 2 of them, the DNA was too degraded after 2,000 years, but we did get results from 18 others.
So where does the DNA itself come from? Is there DNA in the bone itself, or does it have to be found in the follicle of the hair?
Actually, we were able to take it from bone marrow, which is even better, because the process, which had to be hyper sterile, and that's why there was one person brought from the U.S. solely to do forensics, and then a team of archaeologists and an anthropologist, and also the man heading the whole procedure. They found out that the best results comes from bone marrow, so that was able to be taken from the underside of the skull in the area called the foramen magnum, which is where your spinal column enters your skull.
Were any of the DNA tests done in Peru?
No, because there are no ancient DNA testing facilities in Peru.
Okay, so may I ask, who funded the testing?
Actually, it was one individual. I was doing it with a researcher called L.A. Marzulli, and he was able to receive, I think, $250,000 in one check from a man he had lunch with.
Oh, wow. That's a productive lunch.
Very.
How would we, the public, know that the results are sound, that they're genuine, that they're verifiable, that they're legit?
Well, the procedure was looked over, or the supervisor was the head archaeologist of the Ica Regional Museum. He's the one who selected the skulls that he wanted to have tested, and he's the one who brought them out. And again, the conditions were incredibly sterile. So, and then he's the one who actually wrote the official report for the Ministry of Culture of Peru.
And then I believe you said that there were 2 tests done for each skull, correct?
In some cases, multiple samples were taken, 2 different laboratories were used. And so, in general, we got 2 results from at least half of the skulls, and one good result from the other half.
So it's fair to say that this was done with scientific method?
Yeah, definitely. And then the samples, again, there was one person solely involved with the forensics, so she's the one, as soon as the samples were removed from the skull, she's the one who immediately would package them up in sterile casing that was brought down from the U.S., and then she's the one who labeled them, and she's actually the one who also took them out of the country with the official documentation and then presented them to the 2 labs in North America.
Yeah, it must not be the easiest thing bringing skulls into another country.
Well, luckily it was only the samples, but we did have to do it again through the Ministry of Culture since they were skulls in their collection.
Right, gotcha. So how long have you been doing this now, Brien?
Well, I've been involved with the Paracas culture for about 10 years now.
And throughout this time, you've had your own personal theories, and I'm sure you've heard any and all of the theories that are out there regarding the elongated skulls.
I think I've heard them all by this point.
Yeah, by now you've heard them all. Did the results of the findings surprise you, or did it reaffirm your hypothesis?
Yeah, actually the results were really quite surprising, and the interesting thing is that no academic has bothered to study the results. That's kind of how shocking they turned out.
Did they not take this seriously? Why would they not be involved?
Well, even the head archaeologist here in Peru, he was sent the samples before anybody else was. We did have a press conference in Los Angeles in January, and so days before that he was presented with the results so that he could write a formal document for the Ministry of Culture. And I waited for a month after I knew he received them, and finally I went to see him in person and just asked him, have you written your report? And he said, yeah, I've already completed that. Are you going to write a scientific paper? He said, no, I don't think so. And then, were you surprised by the results? And he said, yes, they were not what I was expecting.
Howie's Awas was found to falsify reports to fit into a certain political narrative for Egypt.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have any concerns about the legitimacy of the Peruvian government's involvement in any capacity?
Well, the problem is that the results were much different than had been predicted. And then the so-called report that he wrote simply was a number of sheets of paper that he typed up and sent to the Ministry of Culture in Peru, and then the story just died. So I think the results were simply put into or in with other results documents and forgotten.
So did you not get the actual reports? You got the report from the Peruvian government, but not from the lab itself?
No, I got all the results from the lab.
Okay, sir. What are the results of the findings?
Okay, well, again, this is what's interesting about academia, is that the Peruvian archaeologist said initially, he said, I don't know why you're bothering to do this DNA study, because some Germans did a study a couple of years ago, and they showed that the Nazca people of Peru and the Paracas were directly related. The only haplogroups that you find in this part of the world are haplogroups A, B, C, and D, and that conforms to ancestors having crossed the Bering Land Bridge some 12 to 18,000 years ago. So he said, I don't know why you're bothering to do it. And I had 2 simple questions for him. I said, why did the Paracas have red hair? And he said, I don't know. And then I also said, are you 100% sure you know where they came from? And he said, no. But he did that off the record.
Any ideas as to why they did have red hair?
Well, actually, 2 hair experts have proven that the Paracas had Caucasian hair.
So these are Caucasian skulls.
Yeah.
Again, what were the results of the findings?
Okay, well, 2 of the 18 skulls showed that, again, this is mitochondrial, so this is the maternal side of the family. 2 of the 18 turned out to be haplogroup B, which is consistent with migration across the Bering Land Bridge, but all the others had nothing to do with ancient Native America whatsoever. The commonality of the ancestry is that each one of the haplogroups we found, like one is U2E1, another is H and H2, the commonality in terms of geographic location is Crimea in the Black Sea.
These skulls were found in a graveyard, as I understand. They were relegated to a particular area, correct? The Paracas skulls.
Yeah, yeah.
you have a few different types in this same graveyard. Is that my understanding?
Well, yeah. Actually, we studied from two different graveyards, and that was based on the recommendation of the archaeologist. So there were some that he wanted to study, and there were some that I wanted to have studied. So we came to a compromise. He wanted ones from a site called Cerro Colorado, which is a more recent cemetery, like as in still 2,000 years old. And then the ones I wanted were from a different cemetery called Chongos. And Chongos is where the largest elongated skulls are found on the planet, like specifically that cemetery and no other.
You say they're Caucasoid, so we can rule out extraterrestrials.
Well, from the maternal side, we can rule out extraterrestrials.
Does that hurt the interest in the skulls, or does it legitimize your work?
I think it makes it legitimate. If there was alien DNA, there's no way that the computer program that was studying the DNA could have a result. It would simply say unknown. But the fascinating thing is that in 3 or 4 of the secondary tests that were done, the results came back unknown haplogroup.
Are these possibly a new species that were previously unknown?
Yeah, actually, it's been proven by different physical features of the skulls that these Paracas were a subspecies of human being.
And what are those differences in the skulls?
The main thing is the lack of the sagittal suture, which is the suture that comes down from the back of your skull towards the forehead. So the complete lack of that suture is not supposed to exist. And then the strongest result is the foramen magnum, which again is at the bottom of the skull, and that's where your spinal cord enters the bottom of your skull, is 2.5 centimeters farther back than normal. So that's not the result of head binding. That has to be a genetic characteristic.
So when we say they're humans, they're not quite human.
No, they're probably Homo sapiens Paracas or Homo sapiens sapiens Paracas. So they were a subspecies of human being that could breed with Homo sapiens sapiens.
I'd be very curious as to the birthing process without the suture line.
Yeah, me too.
Maybe it was all done cesarean section.
Actually, well, that's the next area of study is to study the actual hip features of the Paracas females and see if there are major differences between them and normal Homo sapiens sapiens. But of course, the main thing about this is that we're developing more and more data that's showing that this was a very interesting group of people living 2,000 years ago. And academia, anybody who wants the results can contact me and I'll send them to them for free. But so far, no academic has shown any interest whatsoever, which is frustrating, but it shows that I think they're afraid of what it is we're studying.
Why do you think the mass graveyards and not a dispersion of these skulls?
Well, there are 4 what are called royal Paracas cemeteries. So these are specifically where the elite would be buried compared to the common people. So there are 4 locations, and again, the most interesting one is called Chongos. It's about a 45-minute drive from where I am, and that I've been told by the archaeologists here and also by retired huaqueros who were tomb robbers, that there's a 10-hectare area where all of the largest elongated skulls in the world were buried.
But doesn't that imply that, if they were elites, that this was more a result of artificial deformation?
Well, over the course of time, but the largest ones, we're going to do 2 more, or a study of 2 recently found elongated skulls. The DNA is already at 3 different labs in North America. And so we're going to do radiocarbon testing because that hasn't really been done in Peru. They have this, this ballpark figure of how old they think these people when they live, but they don't have actual scientific data for it. So that's another thing that I'm going to start studying.
And certainly DNA could never tell you how old something is.
No, but radiocarbon testing is really quite simple to do, and now it's quite it's quite cheap. So that could be done in one of a number of different labs in the U.S. And it is going to be part of the two that are now being studied.
So are you satisfied with the conclusion of these tests?
Well, initially I was in shock, and it took me weeks in order to track down where these different haplogroups, like what the commonality was. And the interesting thing is I then sent the results to a number of Russian researchers who know the Crimea area, and they sent me photographs of skulls that have been found there of about the same time frame, and some of them look exactly the same as the Paracas.
Wow. So quite possibly just a very small group of species that had once been on Earth, but yet big enough that they were somehow able to organize migrating to Peru.
Yeah, that's the amazing thing. That's again something I'm working on now. Is I've worked out the possible migration route, and the question is, why would they have left a homeland in the Black Sea? And quite probably it's because they were a people who were being attacked and persecuted, and so they had to escape by sea, which is the fastest way to get out of anywhere.
They would have no idea where they were going. They would have found South America by happenstance.
Actually, the currents could have easily guided them to the coast of Peru, which is quite fascinating. That's why I'm studying that at the moment, is how would you get from halfway around the world to the coast of Peru? But I do have a plausible theory that is starting to make sense.
So you think that's more likely than crossing the Bering Strait?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, because it's a long way to go. You know, most Native American people can trace their ancestry to haplogroups A, B, C, and D, and that's more or less, you know, Southeast Asia or Eastern Asia. So to get from the Black Sea to cross the Bering Land Bridge, and also, again, these people existed about 3,000 to 2,000 years ago. So by that time, there was no Bering Land Bridge. That disappeared about 12,000 years ago.
How common was planking in Peru 2,000 years ago?
Planking?
That's the term I'm using for headboarding.
Oh, quite a few different cultures did it, including the Inca.
Okay, so it was a common practice back then.
Yeah, but the oldest and most curious examples are the Paracas.
But the Egyptians long before then.
The Egyptians theoretically during the time of Akhenaten, but also pre-dynastic skulls have been found that are elongated. I finally saw photographs taken in the late 19th century in the Aswan Museum that showed that. Showed very strange looking skulls, but it's not something that's commonly on display in Egypt. Again, it's a cover-up of sorts.
So these skulls, did they have a larger cranial volume? That is on the inside, so in other words, more room for a brain.
Yeah, about 25%.
Would it have been a larger brain, or would it have been water? If you recall, we talked to Däniken, and that was his theory, that it could have just been water in the brain.
No, it's actually, you can see because if you look with a flashlight on the inside of the skull, again, putting the flashlight through the foramen magnum, you can see where the brain material was in contact with the inside of the skull. So their skulls were, or their brains fully fit the inside of the skull. And that also recently, with the two new examples, one of them is absolutely perfectly preserved. We were able to get not only hair follicles and skin and hair and bone, but also muscle tissue, which was still flexible. I was in shock when we did that. But also the brain is still inside. So they took that one to a major lab in Lima, and it was fully scanned, way beyond even an MRI. So I haven't been sent those results yet, but they did a 3D internal external scan of it. So that will be presented once we get the DNA results.
Do you have pictures of those now?
Unfortunately, no. I've been told to keep my mouth shut until the formal press conference happens after all the results are in. But
it seems like everything is very controlled, the flow of information.
Well, it is, but in the case of the recent tests, It's because we want to make sure that we have all the results together in order to release it all in one package rather than leaking little bits out. And that, that way we'll be presenting all of the solid evidence in one go, so people can't say, well, you didn't do this, or you missed that, or you did this, or whatever.
Fair enough. So where do you go from here, Brien?
Well, I live in Paracas, which is great, so I'm in close proximity to being able to obtain artifacts here. And it just so happened that there was a group in November that came down, and one of them was a dentist who was fascinated with the skulls, and another was a celebrity who was in charge of the tour, whose name I can't divulge at the moment. But they arranged to have the whole process done, and all I had to do is give them connections in terms of how to obtain samples, etc. And fortunately, these samples were taken from a private collection. So the Ministry of Culture told me 5 times, we're not interested. If you want to do testing from private collections, you can go ahead. It's outside of our jurisdiction.
But they won't endorse it or recognize it.
Well, I don't really care, because this information belongs to the public in general now. I'm not interested in having to go through hoops that I don't have to go through.
Are you liked by the Peruvian government? Do you feel like they see you as a bit of a threat in any way?
No, I'm basically ignored by any archaeologist in Peru because I'm not an archaeologist. But more and more Peruvians, and especially guides, like guides here of ancient sites, are becoming big fans of mine because of my scientific theories, and also by the fact that I brought probably 2,000 people from different parts of the world to Peru to see the ancient sites. So I've helped put millions of dollars into the economy, so I don't see why there should be any problem.
Fair enough. So it's fair to say that these DNA tests have somewhat rewritten history as we've once known it.
Well, yeah, they are, and I'm going to simply continue with any opportunity I have of being able to do further DNA testing. Then I will continue this ongoing until the end, basically. I just want to keep building up the amount of data I have.
Okay, so how does the audience come down to Peru and join one of these tours and take a look at the skulls for themselves?
Well, my website is hiddenincatours.com, and I have the DNA results on my website. All they have to do is go into the little search engine and put in Paracas DNA, and the reports will show up that they can read freely, and they're free to do whatever they want with the information.
What's involved in the tour?
Well, we do 3 major tours. We used to do a lot more, but my wife and I are getting kind of, we're trying to tone things down a little bit here. So we have one in June, which is more basically a celebration of the Inca culture, but that includes visiting sites like Machu Picchu, of course, etc. Then we have one in August, which is focused specifically on the elongated skulls. So we see lots of examples here in Paracas and the Nazca area, and in Cusco in the Sacred Valley. And then in November we have our, I guess you'd call it almost mega tour, where we see basically everything you can think of, including Pumapunku and Paracas and Nazca and Cusco and Machu Picchu, etc.
Are there any more digs being done to find more skulls, or are they basically found by fluke?
No, there is basically a practice of illegal tomb robbing that does still go on a small scale, and I'm more and more I'm getting in contact with people in the area who have private collections. So any future sampling will be done from private collections.
I would imagine they're worth a bit of money.
They sell on the black market outside of Peru for about, I think, $1,500 US now.
How many are there?
Oh, thousands of them.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
How many in your museum?
We have 45, I think.
Holy smokes, good for you. What does 2019 hold for you, other than those tours?
Let's see, in February we're going to Mexico, looking at megalithic aspects of ancient Mexico. Then in April, going back to Egypt to see basically every ancient site in Egypt. It's April, yeah. Then June we're going to contact in the desert in California, where I'll meet up with Mr. von Däniken again. September we're doing a tour of ancient sites in Turkey, and then November is our huge tour. So pretty well, 2019 is pretty well full.
So you met Erich von Däniken in person?
Yeah, actually,
I'd be fair to say that I introduced you to him. Am I wrong?
No, that's very true. That's very true. I actually flew over the Nazca lines with him in March.
So is he a good guy? He must be quite the character.
Oh, he's great. You know, he's Swiss German, so he's got a very short temper. But at 83, his mind still works like a Swiss watch, and flying over Nazca with him was amazing because he looked like a little kid looking out the window, even though he had done this probably 50 times. So he's a very charming man. He's great to have a conversation with. And he just wrote a new book, and I think he included 2 or 3 pages about me on the Paracas skulls because he'd never seen them in person. So I guided him through our museum here, and it was the first time he saw them, and he's just like, what, you know, he was overjoyed. It was great.
Did he have any other impressions of the skulls other than joy?
Well, he says they're extraterrestrial.
Or an homage to the gods.
Yeah, basically. He thinks that the whole cranial deformation thing was a way to copy what the ancient ones looked like, and that the originals must have come from our planet, etc. But I gave him a copy of the DNA result. Or actually, I gave him a copy of the book of the DNA results, and so he was quite happy with that. And also, I have a book that I wrote about the Paracas, just finished about 6 months ago, called Beyond the Black Sea, and that shows the connection between the Black Sea and Peru, and that contains all of the DNA results as well as medical and archaeological examination.
Are your books still being written in paperback or hardcover, or are they all done with e-readers?
Both in paperback and also tablet or ebook format, and all through Amazon, because having them publish on demand is a lot cheaper and a lot better than having 1,000 copies done in Peru and then you try to ship them out of to different parts of the world. It's just ridiculous. So it's a very, very good system.
So the audience doesn't have to go to David Hatcher Children's site anymore. They can go directly to Amazon. Oh
yeah. I've got 36 books now, and they're all on Amazon.
Good for you. Your website, sir,
is hiddenincatours.com.
And you have a great YouTube channel, by the way, with some incredible. You must be using a GoPro.
Actually, I'm using what's called an Osmo, and it's made by a company called DJI. And no, they don't give me any free stuff. It's just they make incredible stabilized cameras, like way beyond a GoPro. And so I'm actually getting the latest one, which actually is a tiny thing that connects to a cell phone, and it's a gyro stabilized camera, so way beyond what any electronic stabilization can do, and fits in your pocket. So I'm getting that one for Christmas, which is great.
The quality is so good, it almost feels like you're there. And it's not necessary, I guess, for people to go to these places. They can just go to your YouTube channel.
Actually, that's the latest way that I've been filming is from that perspective, as if it's your eyes walking up the stairs and kind of thing like that. I'm still loving making YouTube videos because I'm very basically artistic by nature. I've always wanted to be a filmmaker, and now I actually get to do it, which is a lot of fun.
I was at MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art, last year. And, of course, they have Monet and Van Gogh and Salvador Dali's there. And we've all seen these in books and in school and stuff. But you don't know what it's really like until you see it in front of your face.
No, that's very true. And the same thing with the ancient sites in Peru. It's about at least 100 times more interesting if you see them rather than someone else's impression.
So there you go. So to the audience, if you're going to Peru, check out Brien Foerster's tour if you can get on there. Brien, always fun chatting with you. And thank you so much for being on the program.
Oh, pleasure, Russell. Thank you so much.